I'd like to start my remarks with a letter that we received recently, because I think it reflects both the opportunities and the challenges we face in the national security arena in an era of fiscal austerity. And we get a lot of mail, not all of it's flattering, but this one comes from a future member of AIA. It's from a young student named Hunter. It reads, "Hi, I'm 9, but I'm smart." I told you he was a future member of AIA. He continues, "I've been fascinated by planes, and I'm sending you a blueprint of one called the M62. Now the drawing he enclosed shows a bomber with a triangle-shaped wing, this is it, 4 bombs, and 3 flaps. Now you can see Mike Donnelly from the stars there. It's clearly an Air Force airplane. And it only has 1 engine, if you can look. So obviously, Hunter's been following the debate on alternate engine. But Hunter goes on to write, "You have to keep this between us and the president. This plane is top secret." Finally, he indicated that the only compensation he wanted for this, for his design, was a model of the final product. I think Hunter's letter highlights the issues confronting us. Our future is inextricably linked with the technology that you all develop. But we're entering a period of serious resource constraints. For the past decade, we've lived in an era where when we faced a new mission, we could solve it with additional resources. When we wanted to take advantage of a new technology or build a new plane like Hunter's, we could solve it with additional resources. Going forward, we're not going to have that luxury. We're going to have to make some hard choices. Indeed, in my view, the central challenge we face today in defense planning is how to manage a defense spending slowdown responsibly in the midst of 2 conflicts and numerous other commitments, as well as future threats. The U.S. and European allies are experiencing a significant financial crisis. And putting our economies back on sound footing is going to require that we put everything on the table. That means entitlements, it means revenues, it means discretionary spending on the domestic side, and it means defense spending. There's just no plausible solution to our deficit crisis that doesn't involve some reductions from the 20% of government spending that goes to defense. Now, I think this is a national security imperative, because if we don't solve this deficit problem, we will not have a strong national security. Never in the history of the world has there been a strong military power that's based on a weak economy. But managing our military in these tight circumstances is going to be a challenge for the Defense Department and industry alike. We have the most capable and professional fighting force the world has ever seen. The challenge is to accommodate our fiscal circumstances without degrading the capabilities of that force. Now, I think as we look at this challenge, I think one way we want to try and scope it is to look back at history. We've now arrived at the 5th inflection point in defense spending since World War II. The first 3 happened right after conflict: World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. The 4th occurred in circumstances somewhat similar to today. We had a serious fiscal crisis in the 1980s, caused Congress to put caps on discretionary spending, including defense. And then, of course, the Cold War ended, and there was a further downturn in defense spending. What these 4 transitions hold in common is that in each case, DoD suffered a disproportionate loss of capabilities. And each time, we've had to rebuild our defense capacity, often at great expense and under urgent circumstances. In other words, we're 0 for 4 in managing drawdowns to this point. With troops deployed in active conflicts, we're going to have to do better this time around. And I think we can, if we at least in part look back to those previous drawdowns for their lessons. And I draw 4 broad lessons from those drawdowns. First, I think you need to make hard decisions early. It is not going to get better. Indeed, it's probably going to get worse. The defense budget is going to be more constrained, and even the best managed programs always have some cost stress. So if you cannot afford it now, you surely cannot afford it in the future. So we need to be sure that every dollar we're spending on systems are for systems that we need. We simply cannot afford systems that are marginal in terms of capability or in terms of performance. The equation is that simple. The second lesson is that it's not going to be possible to generate all of the savings that we need from what I call pure efficiencies. And by pure efficiency, I mean it basically the business school sense that we're going to do the same mission or the same thing for less money. Now, there are some instances where we're going to be able to do that, and we've already tried to achieve some. An example would be cloud computing, where I think you can get indeed the same or even greater capability at lower cost and with better security. But we're not going to find $400 billion over the next 12 years in those kinds of efficiencies. And so what that means is we're going to have to prioritize. We're going to have to eliminate programs that, while valuable, are not valuable enough to sustain in the fiscal circumstances we have. The nice-to-haves are simply going to have to go. The third lesson is we have to approach the reductions in a balanced way. Reductions focused on a single area like operating accounts hollow out the force by depriving us of needed training and operating hours. Similarly, reductions that single out the investment accounts force a procurement holiday that we simply have to buy back later at even greater expense. To avoid either coming to pass, we need to balance reductions across force structure, operating accounts, and investment accounts. At the end, what we don't want to have is a force that's the same size but does everything less well. The final lesson is we shouldn't cut too much or cut too fast. Rebuilding capabilities 5, 10, 15 years in the future comes at great cost. And sometimes those costs aren't just financial. For example, in the years after World War II, we grew down too far, too fast, and then we faced the situation in Korea. And we paid for that not just with dollars to rebuild our military, but we paid for it with the sacrifices of our men and women in uniform. We do not want to make cuts today that we're going to regret in the future. To help manage the drawdown, the department has begun a comprehensive review. It's going to help frame the choices in terms of strategy and plans, missions, and capabilities. The lessons of the past will loom large in that review. We need to avoid across-the-board cuts that will weaken all our capabilities, whether critical or secondary, and instead we need to make vertical, targeted cuts based on a strategic assessment of what's needed and what can be sacrificed. Now, as we manage a slowdown in spending, it's critical that we preserve the capabilities resident in our industrial base. By industrial base, I mean not just the facilities that manufacture components critical to warfighting dominance. I mean the financial strength and durability of companies that run those factories, that invest in the next generation of technologies, and that design the increasingly complex systems that make up our military. Now, the industrial base we have today is a relatively recent development. Before World War II, we relied heavily on an arsenal system in which most of the means of production were in government hands. It was essentially a corollary to the reliance on mass mobilization rather than a standing army. No standing army essentially meant there was no need for an industrial base. Now, the risks inherent in that system became apparent during World War I. With no ability to ramp up production, when we entered World War I, we had to depend largely on the British and the French to produce munitions, vehicles, and other systems that we needed to fight the war. In World War II, there was a paradigm shift. We mobilized the industrial base, produced a tide of weapons and material that helped win the war. And the achievement largely elevated us beyond the arsenal system. It established an enduring partnership between science, industry, and the military that has given our forces the kind of technological advantage that has led to the successes of the last 60 years. Our defense industrial base has emerged in the past 3 generations as a true national strategic asset. Thousands of firms, some big, others small, equip our military. These firms, their suppliers, and their suppliers' suppliers, each are linked in a powerful chain. If broken, they can have outsized consequences for our military readiness and our technological superiority. To ensure the nation has industrial capacity going forward, we're conducting a close study going sector by sector, tier by tier, through the industrial base. The goal is to assemble a long-term policy that protects that base as we slow defense spending. It's intended to inform our budget decisions, our acquisition decisions, and to provide our views on the various steps industry will be taking to address its own needs in the defense drawdown. Although we've just started this study already, several overarching themes have emerged. The first is the importance of ensuring competition in the broadest sense of the word. For the past 60 years, competition has provided our armed forces with the best technology and the most reliable equipment. It has not only ensured that defense industry has that technology, but it's ensured that we're exposed to creativity and the capital markets. In the end, it yields the best goods and the services at the best price for the warfighter. The globalization of our industrial base is not an option, it's a fact. But the corollary of that globalization is to ensure our defense industry not only welcomes competition, but the international market welcomes U.S. defense products. Which leads to the second theme that's emerged from this industrial base study: the importance of international sales to protecting our industrial base. A significant impediment to international sales for American companies is the archaic export control system that we operated under. It was developed during the Cold War for a period of time that no longer exists, and in the current circumstances, it frequently fails in its central purpose to keep states of concern from acquiring sensitive technology. Indeed, from the results we see in this system, one might think the central purpose of our export control system is to make it as difficult as possible and as time-consuming as possible for our closest allies, many of whom are fighting alongside us today, to buy American equipment. The barriers we place at this point look something like a marriage of the complexity of the IRS with the efficiency of the Department of Motor Vehicles. Something's going to have to change. We need to reverse this dynamic. The Obama administration has undertaken a comprehensive reform to do just that. The President, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Commerce are all committed to seeing it through. The heart of a new system is a single agency, a single list, and a single IT structure. Now, we've already made progress on that. We're working our way through combining the munitions list. And we've also made progress, as I think Andrew mentioned earlier, in getting the first steps, which were the Defense Trade Cooperation treaties with the UK and Australia through. In parallel, we're pursuing reforms with our technology control, technology security, and foreign disclosure process. How we currently transfer technologies is now governed by 13 separate processes that are neither integrated nor synchronized. The process looks a bit like a plate of spaghetti. You cannot tell where one strand ends and another begins. And if you want to try and advance something in this system, you simply pick up one of the strands and push. The goal of our reforms in this area is to create a single, centrally governed, integrated process. And we've already started taking the steps to do that. The final theme emerging from our study of the industrial base is the importance of targeted research and development spending, even as budgets decline. Defense spending plunged, as I mentioned, after Vietnam during the 1970s. But even in that time of fiscal austerity, defense decision makers found the resources to protect technology that provided us the ability to build stealth aircraft. Had they not done so, stealth aircraft would have been left on the drawing board instead of deployed in today's Air Force and Navy. Today, we must similarly work with industry to incubate the kinds of technologies that we're going to see in the future: long-range strike, unmanned aerial vehicles and robotics, and cyber defense capabilities. We need to ensure that these and other technologies are protected as we go through this defense slowdown, so that future decision makers will have the opportunity to deploy the next generation of systems with American fighting forces and maintain the technological edge that we've come to expect. Seeing through the investments is going to require sustained stewardship from both government and industry. Those of us in the department, like you in this room, are in this for the long haul. We need industrial partners and financial backers who think and act likewise. In this respect, our view is similar to long-term investors, not short-term speculators. Think Warren Buffett, not Gordon Gekko. Only by taking the long view can we collectively manage to slow down without disrupting the capabilities of the force the nation has developed. If we continue to execute and we follow the lessons of the past, tough choices, prioritization, balance, and avoiding precipitous cuts, I think we can successfully transition to the new fiscal environment, and we can do so in concert with industry. This brings me back to Hunter, my 9-year-old aspiring aerospace engineer. He closed his letter by saying, "Please make my design real." And that is our challenge today. We will have fewer resources in the future, but we still need to be able to make good ideas real. We need to retain the capability to produce the systems and technologies that will make our nation stronger and safer. At the end of the day, we need to be sure that Hunter has more than just a model. Thank you.